I remember our biggest customer uh, he had some homes that he was considering selling, didn't really know what to do. And my office manager and I wrote him an email kind of laying out like, hey, here's the financial puts and takes of this. And like, here's roughly like what we would recommend doing with your funds. And this guy comes back and he's like, you're not my financial advisor. Don't ever tell me what to do with my money. And I'm like, all right, like, sorry, that's I guess what I was used to. But I think it's more just having a customer upset at you for what I thought was like a pretty thoughtful and good recommendation when in reality this customer in particular just wanted us to kind of manage the property, do our job, and not really go above and beyond.
Welcome to Unfiltered, the official podcast of propertymanagement.com. I'm your host, Dylan Scroggins. Matt Spear, founder of propertymanagement.com, is taking the afternoon off. His wife's having a baby. So he is not going to be joining us today, but we have a special guest, Mr. Chas Foote, CEO at Grove out of California. Chas, thanks so much for joining us.
Happy to be here, Dylan. Appreciate it.
And we were just talking how we got connected. It feels like I've known you for years, but we got connected like I think 6 or 8 months ago through Peter Loman's newsletter. So shout out Peter, friend of the pod, and it's fun how things come full circle. Well, how's life in California, man? Everybody else is freezing, but I'm sure you're playing golf this afternoon.
Yeah, I didn't know. It's good, man. I have too much work to play golf, but it's great. I'm up here in San Francisco. We got the Super Bowl on Sunday, so it's nice, it's sunny, and life's good.
Too much work to play golf is a line that a guy says when he has a tea time that afternoon. So
I got a tea time
I know
tomorrow.
you're
I got a tea time
tricked.
tomorrow.
Nice, nice. Well, since this is a pre-Super Bowl pod and it's time stamped here, right? It's not going to get released till after. What's your pick?
I think Seahawks win fairly big, 31-17.
All right, well, now I got to make a pick. I'm
Yeah.
going Pats with the upset. Pats by 4. The
I
spirit
don't know,
of
man.
Tom
I'm a
Brady.
Broncos fan. And so there's a little bit of spite in there, but the Seahawks are so good. I just
Oh,
don't see
man.
them losing.
I love spite. I love pettiness. I love all the things. So I know we text back and forth about college football often. So
Yeah.
that's always good. Well, man, so much to talk about. And that was my challenge to you before the pod is to challenge me to stay on track. But I love your story. We get so many different stories on this podcast, right? Someone who bought, 5 homes 20 years ago and now has 1,500. Someone that bought into a franchise, someone who started managing properties like Matt and then kind of naturally became like everyone has a different story. Would love to kick us off. Tell us a little bit more about you and your story of how you got into property management, which I think it will be a really cool, different narrative from some of our past guests.
Yeah, happy to. So I'll take you from the start, and it will tie back because it's relevant. I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah. That's where I'm from. Grew up in a family of small business entrepreneurs, right? My grandmother started a real estate brokerage. Grandfather was a CPA who bought a bunch of CPA firms and a number of other entrepreneurs that I respected and grew up around. I really took a completely different path after college. I was in finance doing investing and specifically investing in like really big public companies. Like I worked at a firm where like you'd go to the bathroom and like Bob Iger, the CEO of Disney, was like in there washing his hands, right? So it was a really cool job. But as I was doing it, I never really felt like super inspired, right? I had watched all these great small business entrepreneurs show up in their community, make a big difference. And I just didn't really feel like that part of my life was coming through. So I went back to business school. And the idea with that was to learn how to lead and hopefully lead a small company as quickly as I could coming out of school. And through that experience, I linked up with some investors who were interested in backing entrepreneurs to buy good small businesses. And so after that, I searched for a business for about 15 months, looked in a number of different industries. Property management was on the list, and it was an industry that we were really interested in. And then luckily, a really good business came up for sale, and we were able to buy the company. So that's how I got into it. I'm not like a real estate guy. Prior to this, like my only experience with property management was as a tenant, not even as an owner or anything like that. But, I felt like I could run a small business and had backers who had experience doing that. So there I was in the CEO seat kind of on the first day.
You're a guy who's worked at these businesses. You've seen a lot of businesses. You've got a great MBA, and you're saying you looked at a ton of businesses over 15 months, but you were attracted to property management. What about property management and maybe not your specific business you bought, but in general, what are specifics about the businesses in this industry that make it attractive to you who has a fresh set of eyes on it?
What we were looking for and what usually leads to success for folks that are kind of first time CEOs, it first and foremost is recurring revenue, right? This is a highly recurring business in the form of, management fees, ancillary fees, maintenance, whatever it is. So that was like investment point one is this is recurring. And then in order to be, good and recurring, the churn has to be low. And that's kind of a mixed bag in the space, but it can, we've seen businesses that are 10% or less churn. So that's really attractive. Secondly, you don't have to invest in the business in the form of, purchasing new equipment, things like that. So it's super efficient from a money perspective. And then thirdly, it's a pretty high margin as well, if done correctly. So like that's like the investment thesis on property management. Now, as we dug into it, we learned that it's a lot harder than what it would look like on paper, but purely from the investment perspective, those were the 3 points that were pretty exciting for us.
Gotcha. And tell us about, well, how long have you just kind of time the timeline here. How long have you been from purchasing the business to now? How long has that time frame been? And then what have you been doing in that time frame in regards to hands on the business and also possibly some other ventures that you could share?
So we bought the first business. It's called Coachella Valley Property Management. At the time, it was called Zepco. November of 2024. So about 15 months ago. And, I stepped in and replaced the owner. Fortunately, the owner had kind of removed himself from any type of customer relationship. That was huge for us when we were purchasing the business, right? Like having that customer relationship lie somewhere besides the owner is important. So that gave me the opportunity to kind of spend my time focusing on operations and growth. So with that business, we put in EOS, we put that kind of to a T, rolled it out. That went well. We invested a lot in sales and marketing, kind of changed the reporting structure for who sales would report to and how that would work. And that worked pretty well. We grew by about 100 doors last year at Coachella Valley. Feel like the business is in a good spot from an operating perspective as well. Grove, which is the owner of Coachella Valley, is also looking to expand through acquisition, right? We grow organically at the businesses that we buy, but we also are looking to buy, other great companies. And so just about a month ago, we bought our second business up here near San Francisco, about an hour and 20 minutes away. We bought another company that's about 450 doors, kind of similar dynamics to what was happening in Southern California. And we're looking to do the same thing, right? We're going to invest in sales and marketing. We're going to keep the team in place. And we're just going to kind of professionalize a lot of the operations there as well.
Let's dig deep into that word because professionalize is something that we talk about a lot. And I think one of the reasons I wanted to highlight you making a conscious choice to be in property management is that from my angle, I don't own a property management business, but I talk to a lot of owners. It just feels like they don't give themselves enough credit. It's a great business and it's really hard, but there are some software companies, that's my background. And you mentioned, being in San Fran, who would be incredibly envious of the business model of a property management company. And you talked about professionalize. Walk us through, I know you've referenced it a little bit, but just the industry as a whole, like what are some things as someone who's really excelling in this industry, which you are, and you're buying businesses, you're making them grow. What are some things that has been helpful to you more specifically in professionalizing your businesses? And then also the industry as a whole, what are some areas where they can professionalize more?
Yeah, maybe just to react to that first comment, Dylan. Yeah, it's funny. I think property managers kind of get like lost in the fog of war, right? Every day is so hard, and you have 100 things breaking, something's going wrong, a tenant's yelling at you, an owner is yelling at you, and makes the business just feel like a slog often. But you're right, like at a higher level, it's a very strong business. And if you were to look at kind of the lifetime value of a customer versus what it might cost to acquire a customer, like it's a strong industry and a really good business. So I guess maybe I would encourage the listeners to maybe pull 20,000 feet back and, be happy you're not out like selling a product that starts at zero every day. And we have the luxury of that not being the case. So in terms of professionalizing, I'm not like a real estate person. I didn't come in with that type of background. And so we kind of looked at the company and we're like, all right, we're running a small business. What has worked at other small businesses, and how can we kind of apply that to property management? So we did a few things. First and foremost is just like blocking and tackling around like HR and benefits, tightening that up,
Mm.
making sure it's super clear about here's the days you have off, here's the days you don't, like, and making sure we're kind of above board from a legal perspective. I mentioned EOS. I've seen some companies in this space put that in, but we really like that, right? Having a clear 5-year vision, 3-year vision, 90-day goals, who reports to who does what. That's another thing that we put right in place. And then finally, on the sales front, like being very detailed around what it costs to acquire a customer, how long that customer is going to be with us, what the value of that is, and then just, not being afraid to invest a ton in sales and marketing because we know if we're in this business for 10 years and we have really high lifetime values and fairly low cost to acquire, like let's just invest a bunch of money off the start and try to get as much customers as possible and it'll pay off down the road. So I'd say those are some of the things. None of them are like, silver bullet, like, oh my gosh, this guy's a genius, but doing them well all at the same time is really what we've tried to do and what I think we've done a pretty good job at so far.
I'm only offended you didn't mention recruiting. I
We'll
will.
get there, Dylan. We'll get there, Dylan.
Yeah,
That's a
no, I'm
core
just
part of
kidding.
our.
I'm kidding.
No, really, like, I think hopefully we do get there, and maybe I'll just go there now. Like, Grove, the other thing I learned about property management is that it is just such a local business, right? Like, your customer wants to know that the property manager knows what their house is going to rent for on this specific block in this specific city. And so, it's tempting to want to make this like professional, operationalized, like Death Star with one brand and like we are one. But I really think the business works best if there's a local leader on the ground who is very engaged with the customers, very engaged with the area, and is growing their business in their market with some help from the operating top company. And so recruiting is a big part of that, right? Like when we buy a company, most of the time it's an owner who wants to leave and we'll replace them within 3 to 6 months. I'll be involved in that, but we need to hire people who are talented and excited about the business, not necessarily have experience in property management, but yeah, like our hiring process and how we source candidates is another important part of kind of our operation.
Yeah, talented and excited. That's a great line. And just to get even more in the weeds, I know, we've talked a little bit and, just kind of even kind of learned about your business, some of your tech stack. So Property Mill really caught my eye. Is that something that you implemented or was that something that was already there?
Yeah, I put that in, and I'm a fairly intense person when it comes to keeping track of metrics. We were using a different vendor for maintenance, and I just didn't really feel like I had a handle on how our maintenance department was doing, and Property Meld gave us the tools to really measure and keep track of everything. I think it's a great software, and I'm pretty excited about what they can do from an AI perspective in terms of follow up on work orders and answering phones and things like that. Like just a great tool to help our maintenance coordinators do their job better.
So you on the buy side, and this is where I gotta hold myself accountable to not go down too many rabbit trails. It's just fascinating. Once again, you see property management as just the industry as a whole is a really good business model historically. But even for this business that you've just bought recently, what about it specifically? I mean, care to share what you can, but do they have a lot of these systems already in place? Is it something where you have to kind of start from scratch with some of these new softwares? You mentioned AI. Like when you're looking at these businesses, are these ones that are already humming, or are they ones where there's like a lot of foundation, but you still have a lot of improvement needed? Because we might have some people listening that are looking to sell their business. So, what are some things they can do now to kind of maybe set up for a sale? So, I've baked in a lot of questions there, but I think you're picking up what I'm putting down.
Yeah. The answer to that, Dylan, is I would rather buy a well oiled machine and I'd be willing to pay to buy that well oiled machine. But if we find a company that has very low churn and the owners, maybe not the main point of contact, but there's a long way to go from a operational perspective, we'd be interested in that too, but probably just wouldn't pay as much for it. So that's the answer to that question. I think in terms of folks that are considering selling, I will go back to it again. Like if you own the customer relationship as a property manager and you're not willing to stay on, there's just a pretty significant hit to what I think a buyer would be willing to pay for that because the odds of the customers leaving when you retire are very high. So anything you can do to kind of distribute that customer relationship to your team is going to be very helpful for us as buyers. At least that's how I view it. And particularly in the context of what we want to do, which is maintain the company's brand, maintain the company's legacy, like really keep the ethos of the company there and build upon it, especially if we're entering a new market, as opposed to absorb it up into a bigger company. That does require the business being in a better position if you want to sell to a buyer who's going to do that, as opposed to just selling to a larger company in the space who may be able to just absorb the door and carry on.
Yeah, I feel like 80% of the acquisitions, really 90% of the acquisitions that I hear about is a larger PM group, maybe on a national scale or even a larger one local scale. Let's say 2,500 doors buying a 200 door portfolio, or even 1,000 doors buying a 300 door portfolio. We've mentioned the recruiting. Like I work a lot of people who are growing, and that's why they call me. Is they buy 400 doors and need like to level up the leadership. But you're the second ETA person I've talked to in the last 2 weeks. For those who don't know, ETA stands for Entrepreneurship Through Acquisition. If you jump on TikTok, there's someone selling you a course about how to buy 5 car washes with no money down. That is not what we're talking about. We're talking about a more, sophisticated buyer, like a guy like Chaz. But tell us about the ETA space. Like, do you think there will be more people like you who, with no real estate or property management experience, are consciously making a decision to enter this space? Or do you feel like you just kind of had a natural knack and this was a deal that you just bought, right? So do you see more momentum in the ETA space targeting property management specifically, or do you think that will remain an exception?
Yeah. So I'll briefly explain ETA from my perspective to the extent that it's helpful. I mean, at a high level, rather than starting a business, you are buying a business. Historically, this path has been available for folks that have gone to MBA programs. And there's really a lot of different like flavors to do it. There's one end, which is called self-funded, where you're usually buying a smaller business. Think, 500,000 of cash flow, or maybe like 200,000 of cash flow, up to like 800,000 of cash flow. You're usually using an SBA loan to do that. And then you have like a very small group of smaller investors that are maybe helping you with the equity piece. On the other end of the spectrum, you have what's called a traditional search fund. And that is where a number of investors who are bigger and have pretty big pools of capital to invest are each putting a little bit of money in to back the entrepreneur, and the entrepreneur is usually going to buy a bigger business, think like $1 to $5 million in cash flow. So the reason I give that context is because the property management industry is full of the smaller businesses. There aren't a lot of like $1.5 to $5 million businesses in the space, at least that I've come across, which is interesting in the context of ETA because usually like the premise of ETA is you want to be like, oh, I'm the CEO of this company, like I'm fast tracking myself. But oftentimes what happens on the self-funded side is you're like buying a job, and you're in property management, you'd effectively be like becoming a property manager. And I don't know how many people would want to do that. Like not because it's bad, but because like that's not their idea of what they're getting themselves into. So like I think it remains to be seen. I think it's all the good things I said about property management remain true, but I don't know if it's necessarily like ripe for ETA for the reason that the lead guy owns a lot of those customer relationships, and those are just so hard to transfer for a self-funded searcher. How we fit into this, like I would say we're pretty different. I tried to be really thoughtful about matching our strategy with the property management space. And I mentioned I'm just backed by one group. Like there's not multiple people kind of in the equity cap table. And the reason that's important is we have a really long-term time horizon. So I hope to be in this business for 20 years. And we have enough capital where like we can buy bigger businesses in the space. So we kind of like get the best of the bigger, but we don't have to like run out and exit after 5 or 7 years like a traditional search fund would be. So we can kind of grow like a nice company in the space for a long period of time, which I think that's what it takes in property management. Like it's not like this hyper growth industry where you're gonna have this crazy exit in 5 years. Like you need to be really diligent about how you think about things. So yeah, I guess that's a long way of saying, Dylan, like I think it will get some looks because the industry characteristics are good, but I don't think there'll be a lot of actual activity because of the certain characteristics of the industry.
Gotcha. And are you sold out on buying California PM groups, or is it really anything on the West Coast? How does that work into your investment thesis?
Yeah, we would do anything kind of west of Denver. I like California. I'm maybe very unique in that. And maybe there's like a couple other groups that like specifically target California. But look, like what makes a good property management business? Areas with high rents, that helps. Areas with growing rents, a lot of areas of California, that's the case. And then for us, like the regulatory landscape, we play by the rules. We work hard to follow all the DRE guidelines, not guidelines, laws. And because we take the time to figure that out, we feel like we're a good buyer for businesses because, we want to be here and we know the rules and we play by them. And I think the positives of California offset the negatives because it's just such a gigantic market and you're playing in a lot of places where people just can't afford to buy homes and need property management.
That's been one of the things that I've learned doing this podcast, even the last 6 months, is how much regulation benefits the property management space. While it also causes a ton of headaches and a ton of obstacles and all the things, I didn't realize that even for like an accidental landlord, like not having to deal with a lot of the things that they should be dealing with and passing that off to a property manager, it's good for business. So it's interesting. So, I mean, I'm in the Southeast where there's way more red hats and red tape, but California, Illinois, and other kind of states that have, yeah, more government regulation. There's some property management groups that we've interviewed to say, you know what? Like, it's been good for business.
Yeah. And I think you have to have the offset of like, it's got to be worth it. Right. So if
Hmm.
my, average rent in the Bay Area for the business we own is like $3,000 a month. If that were 1,500 or 1,800, then the money you have to spend to, work through the regulation might not be worth it. So if you were in Colorado or Illinois and like not in a city center, then that's where the regulation gets a little tougher because you're working hard
Good
for less
point.
reward. But in California, pretty much anywhere near the San Francisco or LA areas, like rents are going to be very high.
Do you have a welcome to the show moment when you bought a Coachella? I know it wasn't named Coachella at the time, and you're the new owner. It's kind of your first, week, first your day, week, month of the job. What was your moment where you're like, wow, I'm the owner, but I'm also in property management?
Definitely. I mentioned, I came into this not being a real estate investor. And so getting to know the customer was by far my biggest learning curve. And I remember our biggest customer uh, he had some homes that he was considering selling, didn't really know what to do. And my office manager and I wrote him an email kind of laying out like, hey, here's the financial puts and takes of this. And like, here's roughly like what we would recommend doing with your funds. And this guy comes back and he's like, you're not my financial advisor. Don't ever tell me what to do with my money. And I'm like, all right, like, sorry, that's I guess what I was used to. But I think it's more just having a customer upset at you for what I thought was like a pretty thoughtful and good recommendation. When in reality, this customer in particular just wanted us to kind of manage the property, do our job, and not really go above and beyond. It was an interesting wake up call, and I think a good one to have pretty early on.
Yeah.
Luckily, we kept the
My,
customer too, so we're all good.
Yeah, we
But
we might add that question to the pod because we've actually had some people. One group in particular, some friends of ours in Montana. He couldn't make the call, or he was late to the podcast interview because he was talking to a cop about a squatter who had a fire or something crazy. And I was like, "Hey, man,
I
tell the
did
story.
have to
Tell it
call
live."
I almost had to call the sheriff on an owner who would not leave our office and was yelling at our staff. So that was a fun one. All these things come up, right? Like, and I tried to get my hands dirty early, right? Like the first week I went and did an eviction lockout with the sheriff and kind of toward a property that was totally just like trashed out and like it looked like a hoarder lived there. So all of these things brought me up to speed quickly on the industry. And I think it was good to kind of see the tougher side of the space early on and kind of
Yeah,
earn some of those battle scars.
that's when you got to keep a T-shirt in the back of your car and like take off your quarter zip and throw a T-shirt on and be like, "Hey, what's
Yeah.
up?" Yeah,
No, I look like I'm about to go play golf. I usually am a little more fitting for the industry. But yeah, look, and I think the other thing too, Dylan, is I'm not gonna pretend to be an expert on this space right now. Like there
yeah,
are so many members of our two companies that are much better property managers than me. And like my job is to just put them in a good position to go out and do their job really well. So it was good for me to get boots on the ground, learn this stuff, but like it is not my job to be able to solve eviction court better than the next guy. Like I empower our team to do that, and I think that's my responsibility.
love it. Well, I noticed too, some of the, us kind of going back and forth before the pod. You mentioned NARPM. We're big fans of NARPM, and not just NARPM, but in general. Like, how did you learn the industry, right? Because we talked to so many people who, like, you ask them how they learn about the industry. They're, well, I've been in it for 25, 30 years. I can't not know a lot about it. But for you, still, you're being humble because I know you know a ton about this industry already. But how have you grown as a leader in this space? And what's increased your comfort level and saying, hey, like, I actually do know what I'm doing? Has it been NARPM? Has it been conferences? Has it been, podcasts, et cetera? Would love to hear the tools and resources that you've used to, for lack of a better term, catch up with the industry right now.
Yeah. The biggest thing is just being in the seat, right? Like you learn a
Mm.
lot about property management, running a property management business. And so that maybe that might not be applicable to everyone listening, but that was by far the biggest one. And, once I got in that seat and I was able to understand how our company worked. A lot of credit to the seller of our first business. He taught me a ton, and I kind of used that lens as a way to learn the industry. So, we run an Appfolio, so I would get all of their stuff. We use Lead Simple, so I would get all of their stuff. And I just kind of like started to put things together. I did go to NARPM Broker Owner last year. That was a very good tool. Like at that point, I could kind of take what I had learned at our business and start to ask intelligent questions, go to sessions that I thought might be interesting. So that was a huge piece of ramp up. And then also various podcasts, newsletters, things like that. But by far, it's just doing, getting your hands dirty, learning. And,
Yeah,
and a
great
lot of
answer.
property management businesses are pretty similar, right? Like it's not like you've seen one, you've seen them all, but like if you've seen one, they all kind of rhyme. And so that's helpful too.
Are you going to be a broker owner this year?
Yeah. New Orleans, man. I haven't
Love
been
it.
there since the 2009 Sugar Bowl. So,
Wow, you had to bring that up. So we were at that game. Yeah, we talked about that.
yeah, we were
So
both at that game. Yeah.
what Chaz is doing, for those don't know, he's trolling me because we were probably like in high school or around that time, maybe early
Yeah.
college, and we didn't know this, but we were both at the same game where Utah beat Alabama. So granted, Alabama was 12-2, could have cared less about being there. I think most of our players had partied the night before, but still, hats off to you for beating Bama.
I was hoping Matt was going to be on because I think, Indiana just smoked Alabama on the Rose Bowl. I think between him and
Uh,
I, we're like the only two
I think you're right. I think you're
two
right.
kind of like, not just traditionally football powerhouses to take Bama down. So
Yeah,
wanted to gang up on you a little bit.
for all we know, Matt's wife could be in labor right now, or he's just at his house watching Signetti YouTube
Yeah.
videos.
He's still
It's
celebrating. Yeah.
it's really a coin toss at this point, but yeah, I'm excited. Speaking of Matt, he bought a Sprinter van that has an internal, podcast studio inside it, so we'll have to get you on there, man, and
That was
get a
real. I've
follow-up
seen you
episode.
guys posting about that, and I
Oh,
was
that
like,
is
"Oh, man."
totally real. That is not AI generated. That picture itself might be a kind of a little bit of a fabrication, but no, there's a real van that's getting wrapped right now. And so yeah, man, we're rolling with the broker owner in style.
Oh, well, I would love to come on, to the extent that anyone has found this interesting so far. That sounds like a blast.
No, I think it'd be fun. And also, I think we're doing a happy hour with Profit Coach, Kalmar Group, and PropertyManage.com. So for anybody listening, you want to go to that, just let me know. Find me on LinkedIn. So plug there for the free happy hour. Man, this has been awesome. Like I said, we got to catch up at Broker Owner, get you in the van. Actually, I got to change that phrase. I can't be inviting people to come into my van in New Orleans. We'll work on that later. So we'll start landing the plane. We got so much to talk about, but I'm going to be disciplined here. All right. This is a question that we asked Spencer Sutton, who used to be with VP of Marketing at Evernest. He's recently moved on. I wish him the best. But we asked him this on a whim, but we really liked it, so we've added it to the agenda. How has being in property management changed you as a person?
It's an interesting question. The answer is it hasn't changed me that much. I don't know if that was I happen to buy a business in a space where my personality fits pretty well and keeping track of things and managing processes and doing sales. Like I just like that stuff. And so being in the space, I wouldn't say I've like changed my mindset or anything or like how I live my life. I think for me, at the same time entering property management, I became a business owner, which it's impossible to decouple those two. And I think the biggest change for me as a small business owner has just been, kind of extreme appreciation for employees and really kind of being very thoughtful about every choice I make, knowing that it could impact a lot of other people, whether it's employees,
Mm.
customers, vendors, et cetera. So I guess like it's made me a more thoughtful person being a small business owner and property management as part of that too.
That's awesome, man. Yeah, because you're right. Because your decisions have ripple effects.
Pretty significant too, right? Like, tenants, like this is where they live. This is like the base of their
Mm,
hierarchy of needs. And so it's hard not to be like, okay, like, whatever, like this guy, we should just get him out of there. But like then you start, oh, they have two kids, and like being really thoughtful about that stuff is important because the decisions we make as property managers has like a pretty significant impact on people's lives. So that's probably the answer I would give to that question.
love that. That's a great answer. We've gotten some pessimistic responses to that at times, so I think it's nice to get a good, positive, joyful response. We appreciate that. So it's usually pessimistic in jest. They say, "Hey, it's made me cold hearted or like cynical," but then they always finish it with, "But also way more understanding to people in different situations and things like that." So that was a great answer, man. I appreciate that. All right, so the lightning round here. We'll try to keep the answers brief, but feel free to give context. So, what's the favorite tool or app for your business right now? It doesn't have to be a PM tool, but it's welcome to be.
90IO, that's the EOS tracking software. I think that
Cool.
is super clean and keeps me and my team on our toes.
Love it. A book or podcast every PM leader should check out.
When I read, I like to be pretty pie in the sky. So I love the book How Will You Measure Your Life by Clayton Christensen. Gives you a great opportunity to think about the choices you're making in your career and your life and how they fit with who you want to be. So not tactical, but a good way to reflect.
I'm going to check that one out. One word to describe the future of property management.
Like growth.
Love
Do you want
that.
me to opine on that, or
Please. We got
look,
time.
like I'm pretty uh excited about all the big macro trends that benefit property managers. Not all of them are good for society, but like home ownership becoming way less affordable, interest rates being probably structurally higher than they had been for the past 20 years. General rent inflation compared to wage inflation, like all of these things mean that there's going to be more rental homes, and that's good news for property managers. Like absent some disruption, which is possible, there should be just a massive market for these services over the next 20 years. And there's so many ways to grow the business, whether it's through acquisition or just bringing on new doors. There's so many opportunities from a software perspective to help you grow the business. Like, I think it's pretty exciting. It's not going to be linear. Every business has some cyclicality, and that's totally fine. But if we think about this on a 20-year basis, like someone is going to build a huge company in this space.
Mm.
I don't know if that's going to be us. It's not really our strategy right now, but it's there for the taking.
Well, we wish you the best at Grove. We know you got a lot of exciting things at Coachella Valley and these other businesses that you have and will buy. Appreciate the time. We know you got a lot going on. Pumped to have you visit the in-van studio is a better way of saying it, a broker owner. Appreciate your friendship and partnership in this space, and I wish you all the best. So, thanks for coming on, and I look forward to having you on another time, man.
Cool. Thanks, Dylan. Really appreciate it.